Hi and welcome back to Bike Speeds. So we've got this Dawes Giro 300 here for a service and sort of partial restoration. This is a bike that had been put into a shed in roadworthy condition, but obviously with the dampness of shed and the sands of time it was a little bit seized up and corroded, and we're going to resolve that and get this rideable again. So initially we often get in the comments people mentioning that we haven't changed bearings or haven't looked at forks or anything else. Whenever we do a bike, we're checking for the bearings, so I'm checking the movement, I'm checking the feel, I'm checking the sound to make sure it's okay and doesn't need bearings. So you can see this bottom bracket bearing is spinning nicely. There's no reason to disturb that or lubricate it, and that can be the same for headset bearings, wheel bearings, hub bearings, your forks. All those things I'll be checking along the way, usually at the assessment stage when I'm pricing the bike up for a customer, and I'll advise what I see and feel that the bike needs doing to it in order to get it roadworthy. And in this case of this bike, you know, there was quite a lot of work just to get it roadworthy that was beginning to bring up the cost to a customer that may not use it any more than they did before. So we always have to sort of allow for cost against what really needs doing to the bike. So we begin the strip down process. You can see here on the rear derailleur, the adjuster, the thumb adjuster, was completely out of that derailleur. So obviously that had been wound out over time to keep the adjustment right, and eventually it popped out the top, so you would have no adjustment on that derailleur at all. And also you can see obviously where this bike was dried out, where it stood, the derailleur was completely seized. Now when this went into the customer's shed or garage, that derailleur was probably working perfectly, but obviously where it stood for time, it's at the stage where it needs servicing. Same with this front derailleur, you can see how dry that is and how that clearly needs a little bit of service work. And this Derailleur cable here, you can see how that has absolutely pulled through the end, and I don't really know how that would have happened, but that's completely wrong, so we need to sort that out. And also you can see here that the cable itself wasn't even sitting in its home position, so we had to resolve that as well. Now on the frame of this bike, it's an external rooted bike. It has these thumb adjusters on the frame. This rear derailleur one is not as important as the front derailleur one, but both of those were seized. They both needed work to get those out. As you can see here, they're in quite a poor condition, and you know, it's just subtleties like that that I like to get right as I'm servicing a bike, to just make sure that it's functional and working correctly so that the customer can then enjoy that bike. Now this little sticker here, that is actually packaging from when the bike was new. Often these brake sets come with a little sticker on there because there's no tension on them without a cable. They spring open, and that's to stop the spring open damaging the arm of the brake. You get that on Shimano and other brands, and that was actually packaging from new, so we took that off as well as we were working through this bike. And you can see here that debris on the jockey wheels there, completely dry. It was actually really hard. It was a proper dig with a screwdriver to get that off, but we cleaned them up first, and then everything goes into the ultrasonic cleaner. We actually put those jockey wheels in as well. There were no bearings in those, so we stripped them right out and put them in as well. Now as you can see, as I start to clean the parts up, how they begin to look a little bit shinier, a little bit wetter. You know, you can see how they're cleaning up and they're beginning to revitalize themselves, and then as we oil them and grease them and everything else, they become moist and wet and ready to work again, and you know, seized parts loosen up and free up and are ready to roll again. So thanks to the customer that lent us this bike. We did notice a couple of negatives in the comments recently where people were sort of slating bikes and, oh, the condition of that bike and the way it's being used. That's not a positive thing to do. You've got to remember that these are all paying customers, irrespective of how they ride their bikes or what condition they end up in before they're serviced by us. We restore these bikes and get them running nicely. It's not for us or the commenters to criticise the way a customer keeps a bike. Often it's like this bike where it's just sat for a long while and they're reinstating the bike to roadworthy condition. That, you know, there's stories a lot behind these various bikes that we don't know as commenters in the comments section. So please keep your comments positive. We like to think we're a positive channel. We read all the comments, but we never reply to negative comments because we like to keep the energy and the positivity in our channel. So as you can see now, we've freed up that rear derailleur. That's now working perfectly where it was seized completely before. And we grease everything, you know, as with this skewer. There's sections on this that need moistening. All these thumb adjusters, you can see copper slip on the threads, white grease on the parts that move. That future-proofs the servicing so that everything can be used for many years to come. And we had a problem with the headset bearings. This bike, again, where it dried out on the top there, the headset bearings just wouldn't move. So we decided to change those. Now you can see the top ones there, they're absolutely dry as a bone. Absolutely dried out, and yet the bottom ones, as you'll see shortly, still had grease on them. They were still a little bit moist. They would have probably have done a few more miles, but all the bearings were worn out on this bike, so we cleaned everything up and replaced them, so as you get a nice steering feel as well. The issue you have with bearings that worn on headset bearings is the bikes tend to tramline. They steer their own direction and they become quite tricky to ride really, and you don't notice it until you change the bearings, and then you're like, oh god, why didn't I do this before? Clean up this steerer tube, because we did have a job getting the spacers off, so there was corrosion on that steerer tube, so give that clean up as well. Now we are heading actually towards a year of weekly content. We decided to go to weekly content 1 year ago next week, and next week's bike we've got quite a entertaining restoration, service, repair that we've done to a bike. It took us an awful long while to film it all, but we've got a big one coming next week, so please do like and subscribe and click the notification bell, and you'll get a notification when that video goes live. Now we're just washing this bike down, because all our services we wash the bike down, give it a good clean up. I always like to wash bikes down because it gives you a tactile feel towards that bike, and you begin to feel the problems, like here with this rear wheel. Cleaning it all up like this, I can feel the bearings, I can feel the wear. The spokes were very rusty on this bike, so by cleaning them all up, which I did with wire wool, I can sort of tell the integrity of the spokes and the bike and parts that I'm cleaning. You can sort of feel whether something needs extra work or not. Now also with this, even though I've washed it down, I use a brake cleaner on the braking surface. You can see that black there, that's all off the braking surface after it's already been washed down. So a nice cleaner on the braking surface goes a long way. And as you can see here, this rear derailleur hanger was completely loose, and this was a sort of a theme for this bike when we were going through it as we were servicing it. We go through everything with the torque wrench, which you'll see soon, and the theme of the bike was everything was loose and needed doing. But as you can see here, I'm reusing the rear brake cable. We didn't need new rear brake cables, and that's something that you kind of get a feel for as you go. You know, you can see that brake is working perfectly. There's no need to replace that cable. Same on the front. You know, once the thumb adjusters are all in, as long as everything's working and it's all smooth, there's no need to replace everything. You can see those thumb adjusters that we've now cleaned up spin in and out as they should with your thumb and forefinger, so that's a good sign. And now we're getting the derailleurs back on before recabling, so we've got a new chain on here. We didn't need a new cassette. The cassette had very little wear in it. In fact, the old chain had very little wear in it, but it was just rusted through. You know, you couldn't really refit that. It would have, you know, you might have had trouble with the pins breaking and the rollers not rolling because of the amount of rust on that old chain. So now we're just recabling this up. Stainless steel cables, a little bit of adjustment, everything begins to work smoothly as it should. A little bit of top and low screw adjustments, and the rear derailleur. I always do the rear derailleur first because I always like it in the top gear when I'm doing the front derailleur. And the front derailleur did give us a little problem in that I cabled it up, as you'll see now. And the first time I went to shift it, I couldn't figure it out, it didn't seem to be shifting, and then I realised that actually the low and high screws had been set so that it would only stay in the low ring, it wouldn't drop into the high ring. So that's what we just adjusted there, the low and high screws, to get that shifting nicely top to bottom on that front one. And again, you know, bikes over time, people sort of tolerate problems and maybe do adjustments to iron out those problems without actually dealing with the problem at hand. So that's what we were doing there. Now, like I say, everything was loose and we torqued everything up. Obviously these, where we've done the bearings, we needed to torque up. As you can see, we do everything, you know, brake pads, pinch bolts, mount bolts, seat post, seat clamp, everything is loose on this bike, and we go right through, and then by the time we present the bike back, we know it is absolutely perfect and that everything's correct, even these bolts that hold the chain set on. And we had a missing cover there, so I torqued the bolt, fitted a new cover. It's just a little detail. I like to just spot little details and just get those a little bit nicer. You know, for what that costs, it doesn't cost an awful lot. Now, as you can see here, both tyres, the walls of the tyres were perished. There's a lot of breaking down there. We put an advisory on that because it doesn't make the bike unusable, but it's just good to let the customer know. And then you also saw there we put new end caps in the handlebars because one was missing. Again, a little detail that gets that bike nice. And as you can see from these before and after shots, what a difference we made to this bike just with a good service and clean and detailing, and it's looking very, very nice. And this bike is now absolutely ready to ride an Ironman if he wanted to, or just go to the shops, and he would thoroughly enjoy that. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Look out for next week's video. It's a big one for our 1 year of weekly content, and we'll see you again soon.